Welcome back to the Kings of Horror.
Every day throughout the month of October, Ryan and I are going to be reviewing a theatrically released Stephen King horror movie. There's a lot of them.
There is a lot. Bibbs, can you feel the temperature rising in here? You feel it? It's
Yeah.
Firestarter. We're talking about Firestarter today from 1984, starring Drew Barrymore, David Keith, George C. Scott, and Martin Sheen. Father and daughter team, Andrew and Charlie, are products of a government experiment. Andrew possesses the ability to control minds. Meanwhile, Charlie can demonstrate the power of pyrokinesis. This duo are on the run from the shady government agency known as the Shop, whose agents will stop at nothing to get its hands on Andrew and Charlie, more importantly, Charlie's abilities. Firestarter is definitely not one of the better adaptations from Stephen King's canon. I think that Mark L. Lester, who also directed An Officer and a Gentleman, certainly brings a competent vision to the table, but there's not much meat on this story's bones to keep me completely satisfied.
You know, I like the premise of this movie. It's
Yeah.
like the Fugitive meets the X-Men.
Yeah.
And that's a really, really cool idea. And like the first half, when David Keith and Drew Barrymore are on the run and using their abilities to fight off all these evil government agents, it's really cool. It's got a good pacing to it. I like it a lot. And then in the second half, and this is the second half, so I don't think it's much of a spoiler, they are captured, and then the movie spends like half the film.
It becomes contained. You can almost tell like their budget ran out. I mean, obviously it didn't run out, but it probably ran out to go into all those pyrotechnics that are on display.
Yeah.
That's all really satisfying, and that's all really, I mean, like, it's amazing in today's, CG-driven fire environments that we see.
Yeah.
It's good to see this on the screen where you actually see fireballs being thrown at people.
The final sequence when Charlie finally gets to let loose is really satisfying. It's really, really cool. And the reason why it's satisfying, and the reason why I really do like this movie, it's not a great movie, but I like it, is because it's about something, and it's about the way that people are trying to control a child's development. Not just in terms of her abilities, but in terms of who she'll become as a person.
At its core, that's the strongest point of this film.
Yeah, David Keith wants her to be a good person, won't hurt anybody.
Yeah.
The government wants her to use her powers for whatever reason they want. I don't know what the hell George C. Scott wants in this movie. He's really confusing. He plays like this Native American.
He wants to be Native American. That's his goal, is to be Native American.
But then he wants to corrupt her and then also kill her while he looks in her eyes and takes her soul.
There's a really weird dynamic between George C. Scott. I mean, and when you do ultimately wind up seeing this movie, he puts on a different persona for Charlie only. He becomes someone else. He becomes a protector. He becomes someone she can confide in, and you almost buy into that. So it's really weird the directions they take, because you're like, wait a minute, how does he really feel? Is he starting to?
He's almost too good an actor.
Yeah, exactly. Because that tough guy veneer starts to slip away, and you're like, wait a minute, I'm falling for this now. You also could tell that the story is fighting against having almost too much material, because they're balancing all these flashbacks to kind of sandwich in more story with Heather Locklear, who we should mention is also in the film.
Yes.
Briefly during the trippy little experimental stage. It's fighting against a lot of story, but almost not enough. It's really strange. It's a really weird dynamic.
It's almost too much to set up. It feels like it's just another one where it feels like a pilot episode to a really cool television series.
Which they wound up ultimately doing with Sci-Fi. They did a Sci-Fi sequel, and then they did
it was
kind of
it was going to be a backdoor pilot, and I think it was Firestarter Rekindled.
Yes.
Which is just a stupid title.
Stupid.
But the original Firestarter, I think it's a fun movie. I think it's pacing slags a bit at times and falls a bit apart in the second half. But for the most part, Drew Barrymore's pretty good. The cast is pretty good. It's a fun little thriller. I give it 2.5 Kings.
I give this one 2 out of 5 Kings. I think the movie is completely passable. I think that Drew Barrymore's terrific. I love the Tangerine Dream score. I think that the second half is a lot more exciting than the first half, but there's just not enough there.
Come back tomorrow when Kings of Horror will return with another Drew Barrymore Stephen King flick, Cat's Eye.